Welcome friends to this course on understanding episodist drama. We are in week 7 and this is going to be lecture number 2. Today we'll discuss Edward Elby's play The Goat. The Goat, or Who is Sylvia, is an unusual play by Edward Elby which opened on Broadway in the year 2002. It's a provocative play which recounts the story of a man falling in love with a goat. This provocative and darkly comic play explores the themes of love, morality, and the limits of human relationship. The word goat in the title of the play alludes to the connection between tragedy and goat. The term tragedy is constituted by two words, tragos meaning goat and oidia meaning song. Therefore, tragedy primarily meant a goat song. Coincidentally, Elby has subtitled the play Notes on the Definition of a Tragedy. The term Sylvia in the play refers to the Roman god Sylvanus, who was the protector of livestock. The play recounts the story of a successful architect, Martin, and his wife, Stevie. In the play, we also have the young son of Martin named Billy and his friend Ross. The central conflict of the play is about how Martin falls in love with a goat and how his wife and other members of his family react to this act of being in love with an animal. This shocking revelation of a man falling in love with a goat disrupts the harmony of relationship which exists between Martin and his wife. The play ends with Stevie killing the goat Martin loves. Edward Elby intends to shock his audience. He wants his audience to ask uncomfortable questions about the moral frameworks that they are following. The title of the play has been borrowed from one of the most famous plays by Shakespeare, Two Gentlemen of Verona. There is a song titled Who is Sylvia? Shakespeare has written, Who is Sylvia? What is she? That all our swains commend her? Holy, fair, and wise is she. The heaven such grace did lend her, that she might admired be. Is she kind as she is fair? For beauty lives with kindness, love doth to her eyes repair, to help him of his blindness, and being helped inhabits there. Then to Sylvia let us sing, that Sylvia is excelling, she excels each mortal thing upon the dull earth dwelling, to her let us garlands bring. In Shakespeare, Sylvia is an idealized woman. She is holy, she is fair, she is beautiful. She is kind and gracious. But in Elby's play, Sylvia is a goat with whom Martin has fallen in love. Perhaps she symbolizes forbidden love. When the play was first performed, it sparked several controversies because it questioned some of the moral norms in which society believes. However, the play was also celebrated for blending tragedy, comedy, humor, and pathos. The play starts with a conversation between Martin and his wife. Martin is troubled by his habit of forgetting things. Martin says, anything, nothing, can't remember a thing. This morning so far, I could not remember where I had put the new head for the razor. I could not recall Ross's son's name. Still can't. 2 cards in my jacket. Make no sense to me whatever. I am not sure I know why I came in here. Martin's forgetfulness is not incidental. It reflects his inner turmoil. It is an outcome of the repressed emotions Martin has. His forgetfulness symbolizes his subconscious attempt to avoid confronting the truth that he has fallen in love with a goat. Martin wants to communicate the truth to his family. When he tries to tell the truth to his wife considers it to be a joke. Let us discuss the conversation between Martin and his wife Stevie. Martin says, "Yes, I have fallen in love." Stevie says, "I knew it." Martin says hopelessly. Stevie says, "I knew it." Martin says, "I fought against it." Stevie says, "Oh, you poor darling." Martin says, "Fought hard." Stevie says, "I suppose you would better tell me." Martin says, I can't. Stevie says, tell me. Martin says, "Her name is Sylvia." Stevie says, "Sylvia? Who is Sylvia?" Martin says, "She is a goat. Sylvia is a goat. She is a goat." Stevie says, "You are too much," and she leaves. Martin is alone on the stage and he says, "Martin, I am." You try to tell them. You try to be honest. What do? They laugh at you. You are too much. I suppose I am. Stevie cannot believe that Martin can fall in love. They have a perfect, happy married life. And moreover, when Martin tells her that he has fallen in love with a goat, it causes more disbelief to her. The notion of falling in love is outside any social norm. Society conditions human beings to follow certain norms and to avoid certain others. It is beyond imagination to think that a man can fall in love with an animal. And that's why Stevie rejects Martin's confession as a joke. However, Martin confides this secret to his friend Ross, who writes a letter to Stevie, and that letter becomes the moment when the truth of Martin falling in love with goat is revealed to the family. This becomes a moment when the relationship between Martin and his wife Stevie is shattered. Stevie lashes out at Martin, mocking his relationship with Sylvia and considering it to be disgusting. She considers this act to be a violation of their marriage, which has potential to disrupt the happiness of their perfect married life. She cannot understand how Martin can be in love with Sylvia the goat and Stevie the human. She says, "I am a human being. I have only 2 breasts. I walk upright. I give milk only on special occasions. I use the toilet. You love me? I don't understand." Stevie's reaction is very complex. She has fury and grief both for Martin. As the play progresses, Stevie starts destroying the objects of the room. Her destruction of these objects mirrors the emotional turmoil that Stevie is experiencing. It also signifies her inability to process the betrayal in her own mind. Martin tries to explain to Stevie. He recounts how and when he fell in love with Sylvia the goat. He says, "I closed the trunk of the car with all that I had gotten, and it was then that I saw her. She was looking at me with those eyes." "Oh, those eyes, them eyes," Stevie says. Martin says, "And what I felt was it was unlike anything I had ever felt before. It was so amazing. There she was. Stevie says, Who? Martin says, Don't. She was looking at me with those eyes of hers and I melted. I think that's what I did. I melted. Martin here insists that his love for Sylvia, the goat, is not sexual, it is not physical. He was smitten by the eyes of Sylvia. Here we have to briefly focus on a very famous work by a very famous French philosopher, Derrida. Derrida, in his book, The Animal Therefore I Am, talks about animal gaze. Derrida begins with his encounter with a cat who had seen him naked. Derrida is posing this question, whether it matters or not when an animal looks at us and we are naked. Human beings are so anthropocentric that they do not grant any consciousness to animals. Countering this speciesist and anthropocentric perspective, Derrida argues that animal gaze reveals the animal not merely as an object but as a subject. Derrida critiques the entire Western philosophical tradition, beginning with Descartes and moving up to Heidegger, which considers that humans are superior to animals only because they have intelligence. He refuses to accept the binary between man and animal. Borrowing from Levinas's idea of the face of the other, Derrida suggests that animal gaze requires an ethical response from human beings. Now, what should have been the response of Martin when Sylvia looked at him with those two beautiful eyes? How should Martin respond to Sylvia's loving eyes? Martin's falling in love with Sylvia can be termed an ethical response. However, Martin's feelings for Sylvia isolate him from his family and society. Martin knows that human desires can defy social norms or any rational logic. His insistence on the authenticity of his feelings for Sylvia challenges social norms and moral taboos, which try to curtail human desires. Sylvia was looking at him with those eyes and he had melted. That's all Martin knows. When Martin's son becomes aware of his unusual act of falling in love with goat, he becomes aggressive. When Billy informs Martin about his affair with Sylvia, Billy, his son, fails to understand the nature of his confession. Billy's emotional turmoil leads to violent outbursts. The father-son bond is shattered. Billy says, "Fucking faggot. You call me a fucking faggot?" Martin says, "I am sorry." Stevie says, "Your father is sorry, Billy." Martin says, "I am sorry, you are gay and that's fine. I don't give a shit what you put where. I don't care one way or the other is what I mean." Billy says, "Yeah, sure." Stevie says, "I said your father is sorry for calling you a fucking faggot because he is not that kind of man. He's a decent, liberal, right-thinking, talented, famous gentleman who right now would appear to be fucking a goat. And I would like to talk about that if you don't mind, or even if you do." Billy says, "Sure, Mom, I'm sorry, you go right ahead." Billy's violent outburst reflects the breaking of traditional family roles and values. Billy himself is gay, yet he cannot understand how his father can be in love with an animal. Because both Billy and his mother, Stevie, cannot understand that love of Martin for Sylvia is not physical or sexual, it is purely emotional. LB portrays love as absurd in the most extreme form. Martin's love for a goat is both tragic as well as absurd. He suggests that love can be both unpredictable and uncontrollable. Martin's love for Sylvia in the play is juxtaposed with Stevie's love for Martin and Billy's love for his parents, all of which reveal the complexities and vulnerabilities inherent in human relationships. LB's exploration of love forces the audience to question the nature of love itself and whether it is possible to love beyond societal norms or whether such love ultimately leads to destruction and alienation. Now, the question that lies before the audience is, why did Martin fall in love with Sylvia the goat? Martin's love for Sylvia has been portrayed as simple, pure, and uncomplicated. Martin feels that Sylvia offers him the kind of love which is free from the complexities and burdens of human relationships. To be in love with a human is to experience several kinds of emotional, psychological, and physical baggages. In contrast, Sylvia's love is not tainted by expectations, desires, or any other kinds of predicaments. Sylvia is an animal, therefore, her love is not fraught with human conditions. Martin finds solace in the simplicity of this connection, which is without the messiness of human emotions. Martin says, and I quote, "Why can't anyone understand this? That I am alone, all alone." Martin seems to suggest here that his act of falling in love with Sylvia is a byproduct of his feelings of loneliness from which he suffers. Martin suggests that Sylvia offers him what Stevie could not. In other words, animal love has the possibility of offering what humans cannot. Martin's affair with Sylvia is not a sexual act. It is an act of rebellion against traditional ideas of marriage, love, and fidelity. In this sense, his love is a rebellion to free man from the social constraints of marriage. Martin presents his love for Sylvia as transcendental and spiritual. It's a love which defies logic and morality. It arises from the desire of experiencing unconditional love. It is born out of disillusionment of human relationships. However, Stevie and others cannot understand this transcendental love that Martin seems to propound. Stevie kills the goat and drags her dead body on the stage. Let us read the passage which describes this act. Stevie is dragging a dead goat. The goat's throat is cut. The blood is down Stevie's dress. On her arms, she stops. Ross says, "Oh my God." Martin says, "What have you done? Oh my God, what have you done?" Billy is crying. Stevie regards Martin for a moment. Ross is immobile. Stevie says, "I went where Ross told me I would find your friend. I found her. I killed her. I brought her here to you. No?" Martin says, "What did she do? What did she ever do? I ask you, what did she ever do?" Stevie says, "She loved you, you say, as much as I do." Stevie's murder of Sylvia is metaphoric. It is an act of destruction against the idealized notion of love. Stevie seems to suggest that love in its idealized form is nothing but a fantasy. Stevie's murder of Sylvia is not merely an act of physical violence but also of emotional violence. Her love for Martin is so strong that she cannot imagine the possibility of someone else being in love with Martin. She says, "She loved you, you say, as much I do, and therefore it seems Stevie has murdered Sylvia the goat." So the question remains, who is Sylvia and why is she murdered? Commenting on this aspect, Boroka Rad writes, "So who then is Sylvia? A question posed again and again in The Goat. Is the sacrificial victim the goat Stevie drags onto the stage? Does it, or rather she, represent the 21st century version of the traditional scapegoat defined as the symbolic bearer of the sins of the people, the one blamed and punished for the mistakes of the others in several myths, as in the Bible, where it is a live goat over whose head Aaron confesses all the sins of the children of Israel on the Day of Atonement? Who then was sent into wilderness? Does the killing of Sylvia embody the sacrificial ritual that so often constitutes a defining structural element and transformative device in LB's plays?" Rad suggests that the murder of Sylvia can be compared to a ritualistic sacrifice. It has biblical and mythological meanings where a scapegoat is sacrificed for the sins of others. Her death or murder could be viewed as a sacrificial ritual. Here, the goat symbolizes the collective sins, guilt, or burdens of humanity. By killing Sylvia, Stevie is purging the family of the sins. So, the goat in the play is a symbolic figure representing the scapegoat, a common trope in myths and religious rituals. Sylvia, as a scapegoat, is a living sentient creature who becomes the symbolic bearer of all the emotional and moral chaos within the family. This parallels the idea of the scapegoat in various traditions, where an innocent being is blamed and punished for the sins of others. Rad also suggests that LB's characters are torn between desire for freedom and social control. There is a fatal clash, a tragic confrontation between man and society in which man is usually a scapegoat and a victim. Martin's desire for Sylvia symbolizes his desire for freedom in love, which society usually regulates through moral and ethical norms. Unless the goat is killed, Martin cannot be brought back to the society. The death of Sylvia is essential for punishing Martin for his acts of transgression. We must remember here that Martin's affair with Sylvia is an interspecies affair. Like Jerry wanted to have a connection with the dog in the play The Jew Story, Martin had tried to have a relationship with Sylvia the goat in the play The Goat, or Who is Sylvia. Both Jerry and Martin have failed. John Berger, in his very famous work, Why Look at Animals, talks about man-animal relationship. He writes, "With their parallel lives, animals offer man a companionship which is different from any offered by human exchange. Different because it is a companionship offered to the loneliness of man as a species. Such an unspeaking companionship was felt to be so equal that often one finds the conviction that it was man who lacked the capacity to speak with animals. Hence, the stories and legends of exceptional beings like Orpheus who could talk with animals in their own language. Berger suggests that animals provide humans with a kind of relationship which is starkly different from human-human relationships. The companionship of animals is unique in the sense that it speaks to human loneliness. And here you would remember what Martin has said, I am all alone, and that's why I have wanted a bond with Sylvia. Berger notes that companionship offered by animals is equal in a different way than human relationships. This equality is not based on intellectual parity or shared language, but rather on a kind of mutual presence. Animals do not demand the same kind of emotional labor or complex interaction that human companions often do, yet they offer a form of connection that is non-judgmental, unspoken, and without the complexities of human social exchanges. In this sense, animals offer a companionship which is not defined by words. It is defined by a shared, silent existence that grants meaning to human life. In both the plays, The Jew Story and The Goat or Who is Sylvia, L.B. explores animality of man and humanity of animals. In both the plays, animals serve as mirrors of internal emotional states of the characters. The dog in the play The Jew Story and goat in the play The Goat or Who is Sylvia. The dog in The Jew Story symbolizes Jerry's loneliness and desperation for meaning. And the goat in the play The Goat or Who is Sylvia signifies Martin's desire for a purer and deeper emotional relationship. However, in both the plays, human-animal relationship leads to the tragedy. Jerry tries to poison the dog, and of course, Sylvia is murdered by Stevie. However, the animals become a catalyst for unraveling the complexities of human mind and human relationships. Now that we have discussed two major plays by Edward Albee, let us try to understand the dramatic aesthetics of Albee as a playwright. Like Camus, Sartre, Beckett, Albee seems to suggest that life has no inherent meaning or purpose and human beings are eventually going to die. Albee writes, and I quote, "Most people spend too much time living as if they are never going to die. They skid through their lives, sleep through them sometimes. Anyway, there are only two things to write about life, life and death." Christopher Bixby also writes, Albee, like Beckett, is certainly in no doubt that we are born astride the grave. Gabriel Miller agrees with this estimation and says that this theme runs throughout the playwright's work. Ultimately, we must learn to confront death, perhaps Albee's central subject, and accept it. Now, you would remember the character of Jerry in the play The Jew Story. Jerry provokes Peter to murder Jerry. This is nothing but an exemplification of Jerry's confrontation of his own mortality. Similarly, the death of Goat in the play The Goat or Who is Sylvia reflects the inevitability of death. Plays of Edward Albee are also critiques of American society and the idea of great American dream. Albee deconstructs the ideals of success, happiness, and fulfillment that are central to American culture, exposing the underlying disillusionment and existential crisis that accompany the pursuit of these ideals. In several of his plays, violence is a response to this oppressive pressure of societal expectations of success and happiness. In The Jew Story, Jerry's confrontation with Peter culminates in violence, symbolizing the collapse of the ideal of peaceful suburban life. Jerry's tragic end is a reflection of the social alienation and internal conflict that arise when individuals are unable to reconcile their inner desires with the external pressures of society. And this Albee achieves by blending realism with the ideals of absurdity. His plays begin with a realistic setting and characters appear to be grounded in everyday reality. His characters can be found anywhere in the society, like Martin is a successful architect, Peter is a middle-class bourgeois gentleman. However, these realistic elements serve as a base for the absurd. The gradual shift from the realism to absurdity disrupts audiences' sense of expectation. For instance, the characters and setting in the play The Goat or Who is Sylvia is essentially realist. But when we come to know that Martin, the hero of the play, has fallen in love with a goat, it raises absurdist dimensions. In the play The Jew Story, Peter's conversation with Jerry in a Central Park is quite ordinary. However, the violence at the end of the play is both shocking and absurd. Albee often uses a mix of tragedy and comedy. He creates the moments of humor in the midst of absurdity. There are scholars who suggest that Edward Albee's plays are characterized by parabolic realism. Parabolic here refers to something which is allegorical, having a deeper, layered meaning. In Albee's plays, this technique allows him to critique not just the surface level realism of human life, but to elevate those experiences into symbolic or universal themes. Albee frequently uses the absurd as a tool for conveying deeper philosophical truths. While his plays often begin with what might appear as a realistic portrayal of life, the absurdity of situations and character actions begins to hint at most significant, often existential themes. Therefore, it can easily be argued that Albee's plays are the parables of the absurd. Albee's plays push the boundaries of theatre by asking uncomfortable questions about human life and the fragility of human relationships. His characters are often locked in emotional and psychological battles. His plays are not merely entertainment. They pose difficult questions before their audience. His lasting legacy as a playwright lies in his ability to merge dark humor with sharp social critique and deep, profound philosophical inquiry. And there is no doubt that Albee would remain one of the most important American playwrights of 20th century. That's all for today. Thank you everyone. We'll meet in the next class.